I'm becoming a property developer kind of very gradually, but it didn't start out like that. I started out as a cameraman and a television news cameraman at that, covering the dying years of apartheid, covering African conflicts, the Middle East and the former Yugoslavia. So in 1995, I covered my last assignment in Sarajevo, and at the time I switched over to documentaries, probably for self-preservation. And at the time, I had a little television business in the Media Mill. Media Mill is on the same block as where 44 Stanley Avenue is today. And on my way to work, every day I passed the old Automobile Association workshops and garages. They were derelict, run down, and I used to notice this steel bridge behind these buckled yellow gates. And I used to like the bridge, and that was it, I liked it. Then a little further down the road, this was quite long after we started, was a disheveled courtyard and a couple of warehouses, which I used to kind of snoop around and look at them and like them and kind of not think much further than that. In 2002, I got a phone call from my brother-in-law who ran two very cool bars in Cape Town, one in Bree Street and then one at the old Bijou Theatre, an Art Deco theatre in Woodstock. And Grant was moving to Johannesburg and wanted to open a bar, and unfortunately he opened the Colour Bar, which was a lot more famous than 44 Stanley Avenue for many years. Anyway, so that was 2002. And he came up and we met the agent that was kind of responsible for this property that was owned by Old Mutual Properties, the biggest property holder in the country at the time. And we spoke to the agent and said we wanted to do a bar. And he said, sorry, we're closing this site, we're going to lock it up, much like next door, no go. And I just blurted out, I said, I want to buy these properties. Now, I was a cameraman, I didn't really have money, and I certainly didn't have money to fix these buildings. So I went home and I thought quite hard, and I thought, I've got to come up with a plan here. And the plan was that I would go out as a cameraman, no experience in retail, I would fill these buildings with fantastic tenants, and then I'd go to the owner of the property business, Old Mutual, not the owner, the CEO, and say, now I need money to fix these buildings, which is kind of laughable, I guess. And I didn't know how to do it because I'm about as far from corporate as you can get. But at the time I met my business partner, who I'm still in business with today. He liked my idea very much, and he also was extremely amused by my enthusiasm. So I then pitched to Mark, and I said to Mark, what I wanted to create was beautiful courtyards filled with trees. I wanted to line the courtyards with the retail kind of shops with extraordinary artisans that brought their product into a retail environment. They were in love with their product, passionate about their product, and even if they were selling through or buying in stuff to sell it, they had to be passionate about what they were selling. And slowly we kind of, he really got this idea. He was a little bit suspicious or suspect, but he thought he was kind of more a mug and bean kind of guy. So, and that's unfair. That's really unfair, sorry. But yeah, he was kind of more commercial than I was. So the next thing, he formally pitched to the Old Mutual, and the Old Mutual said, well, some fool's going to spend his time trying to find tenants, fine. So they set the criteria, and that was that 1,000 square meters of tenants had to be signed up in 1 year. Now, it might not sound too difficult, but it was bloody difficult, because what I had to do was traipse people, possible people that were going to come and invest money in their life and time in the center. That was a complete tip. It was derelict, it was broken, there were no glossy brochures, it was only me enthusing possible tenants that this was going to be a beautiful place, and it'd be stepping over kind of brokenness and broken that, and ceilings were falling out. There'd been a hell of a lot of squatters on the site for years, before, and there were no ablutions, the water had been cut off, so you can imagine what I was stepping over. And some of them really felt sorry for me because they thought I'd lost it, and others could see that there was, there was this will, this thing was going to happen. 2003 in May, we kicked off, and the first thing we did was remove about 60 skips of rubbish. One of the first things we did was pull out ceilings, exposing these old structures, these old roof structures. That's not a particular pretty one, but it gives you an idea. There were lots of them in Being There Coffee today. It's got the most beautiful old roof structures. And then what we did is we cut holes with the concrete. I mean, it was really bleak. It was filled with weeds when we got there, and it was just concrete. So we cut holes in the concrete. I copied little Karoo dams. There are no original thinkers, and I didn't think anything would fit that better than a little Karoo dam. And we even went as far as designing cement pots, which I couldn't find anything to suit the center. So we designed one, and we filled it with indigenous trees. In the beginning with aloes, because the place reminded me of the very old South African postage stamp that was kind of burnt orange with aloes in it, and that's what the place used to look like. And then we got very lucky. The council gave us 40 white stinkwood to put on the outside, and then we started filling the space with fantastic tenants. Those tenants that we had really been pushing hard to enthuse and get them in. He's just joined us, but. And she's also recently joined us, but they were all very much the kind of people that we were looking for. And we were really focused, and we didn't for 1 minute take on anyone that we didn't believe was absolutely right for what we wanted to achieve. And so what's ultimately happened is 44 Stanley Avenue has grown this fantastic patina. It's slowly evolving, and it keeps evolving, and I believe that it just keeps on getting more and more beautiful. And I think the lovely thing about it is that when you cross the threshold, you don't feel this pressure that you're listening to drumming music and you're in a retail environment, and you have to buy something. People just go there to hang out, feel cool, and maybe have a drink and then move along. And we keep on working at it. And the one thing I've learned about developing old urban regeneration projects, and this one in particular for then, was that you never finish. You have to keep going. It's a never-ending project. So we went on to develop other properties, but nothing compares with what happened just about 2.5 years ago. I was driven by a neighbor to 44 Stanley Avenue down through the very poor neighborhood of Lawrenceville and Bez Valley in that area. And the first thing I saw was on Victoria Road, these beautiful gabled facades. And the absolute raw beauty of these buildings. And I'd had a house near, but I'd never gone there, and I hadn't ever seen them. Nothing, however, prepared me for what happened when I crossed the threshold into Victoria Yards. It was a complete disaster. There was rubbish piled up everywhere. The buildings had been neglected. It was a very sorry state. And I saw the exploding potential in these buildings. I just thought, no, this has got to be something else. All the windows had been bricked up, both from the outside and the inside, so covering these beautiful cottage panes that we exposed later and have become very much of the signature of Victoria Yards. I started imagining vegetables planted everywhere because of food security and the area that it was in. And wherever there was an open roadway or whatever, I just thought, let's put in veggies, let's plant fruit trees, vegetable trees, whatever we could. There we go. So that's now, or not now, that's quite a long time ago already. So we just planted and planted. The next thing I saw were these extraordinary workshops everywhere. And I thought we had to fill them with photographers, with artisans, with people that created things with their hands. This wasn't an academic place, it was a kind of a skills workshop environment. And we had to fill them with these guys, and it was very important that these kind of things started happening there. Remember, I hadn't started yet. Oops, fell off the red. The third thing I thought about was the community, which was quite a colorful and vibrant community, as you can see in a black and white photograph. And we were like this big site, 20,000 square meters. Originally, it's now 30,000, but 20,000 square meters. We could not exist as a business in isolation. We had to communicate. We had to be part of the neighborhood, and the neighborhood had to be part of us. We had to kind of coexist and become part of each other. You can see there were real issues in the neighborhood, and still are, and we slowly kind of drive through different ways to get rid of these issues. This was an extraordinary thing I saw. This guy walking, his face was terribly burnt, and that's how he protected himself from people being scared by him. So when was it? 2016, October, we kicked off. And we chose a part of the site that was unoccupied. And we did that because there were lots of people working on the site, messing it up, but working on the site. And I didn't want to eject anyone or create any kind of animosity towards us. So we gave these guys a whole year. They were all on month-to-month leases, and we gave them a whole year to find alternative places. And they all moved off over time, and very peacefully at that. There were no hard feelings, and we cracked on with small teams, no G5s and no big companies. We just kicked off with the chap at the bottom is Joseph. He's the most extraordinary guy, and we encouraged these people to try and find local help. And we did that because we wanted the money that was being earned on the site to go directly back into the homes and places where these people were living in the neighborhood. And 5 of those guys live within 150 meters of the site. And they've all got really good bodies now from working their butts off. We encouraged skills exchange informally, but we'd get a glazer to then learn how to do welding, and this is a technique called airless painting. And so by the time we'd done a year of work, quite a lot of these guys had kind of multi-skilled informally. But we weren't achieving what we really needed to do in order to make this a very successful long-term kind of venture. And that was getting involved with the community. Late last year, this chap walked onto site. His name's Simon Mason, and he told me that he was enrolling at WITS to do his doctorate in active urban change making. I thought, okay, that sounds right. So, and then I found out about it later. But I thought, no, that's cool. You come. And so what an active urban change maker does is he immerses himself. Simon lives in the area, and they look at all the faults, anything going wrong in that area, and they will try and fix those by all means, by whatever means, and make them right. So we couldn't, as landlords, we needed this guy. He kind of needed somewhere to work from, but we needed him almost more than he needed us. So we said, right, here's 100 square meters. 0.76% of our gross lettable area. So it was such a small contribution to make to such an extraordinary, what has become an extraordinary little node of extraordinary people. So what happened is Simon started he started getting people kind of gravitating towards this little room. And very soon we had people from MIT and Smith Universities in Boston, and social architects, and just these like people volunteering. The energy was just amazing. And what has happened is that he's got all this energy going. They're starting to work on project. They launch a little thing called the Makers Valley, which is now a directory of 300 people in the valley that are all interconnected through a directory. So if they need a carpenter or a photographer or a rubble removal guy, they're all there. So they just get on their phone and call these guys, and they all, whatever. It's very easy to access everyone. Another thing they started was the Maker's Way, a safe passage between Ellis House in the west and Skills Village in the east. And they put their idea they entered a competition with the US consulate, and they won just over 2 million rand. And that idea is that Makers Way is going to use locals and unemployed youth that will be paired with makers from the area and outside of the area to prototype ideas that will make that way safe, secure, beautiful, enterprising, whatever. That's the Makers Way, and they've got just over 2 million rand to start that initiative. There are lots of little things going on with kids learning how to grow. There's even now a community garden on the pavement, all started by this little 100 square meters of kind of passion for doing good in an area. They've also they've really pricked up the ears of very important public enterprises like Johannesburg Inner City Partnership, the Johannesburg Development Association, even an international property institution called the Urban Land Institute, Gutta Institute. So it's really starting to rock, and I think this little area is going to be quite an extraordinary place. The JDA have granted a whole lot of money to resuscitate the only registered waterway called a river in Johannesburg, which is the Decay. And there's going to be a lot of money poured into this over the years, and this will become another way of getting yourself through the community, and it's on the border of Nando's and our property. And watch this space. I think in a few years' time it'll have outdoor gymnasiums, amphitheaters, and pathways for people to kind of enjoy the river again. Thank you. That's Victoria yards from the air, and that's what we're trying to do. Just grow a little bit every day. But I've learned an extraordinary lesson from my last 15 years as being a property developer, besides what we know about urban regeneration and the fact that it stabilizes areas, creates jobs, stops crime. All of that is kind of almost a given these days. The most important thing was that we gave nothing. We gave 100 square meters to this little incubator of absolute passion, and they are now accelerating that change in the area way faster than we could have ever done alone. Thank you very much.